End the recording first.
Hold on.
Am I back?
Nope,
Hello?
you're good.
Hey,
I don't know why it had you as muted on my end. That's so strange.
I'm sad because you didn't hear my bit about how you sounded like a person with dementia when you signed on.
Oh my god. Because
you were like, hello, is he okay? It's like, dude, what the are you talking about?
Welcome back to the Florida Band Podcast. You know why you're here. I'm Christian Gordon, band director at West Glades Middle School in Parkland, Florida.
I'm Andrew Lopez. I'm the band director at Coniston Middle School in West Palm Beach, baby.
And I'm AJ Arcia, band director at Coral Springs Middle School in Coral Springs, Florida.
And we are back with Fundies Part 4. How's everybody doing, and how was your Thanksgiving?
I'm good, man. I went to St. Pete for a week. We visited Danny and Aaron, who's the band director at Azalea Park Middle School in Pinellas. Shout out. And we stayed with them for a couple days, and then we did like a normal family reunion in Tampa, and we invited Marissa's parents for the first time, and that was awesome because both my cousin and her dad are like the two most sarcastic human beings on the planet, and just watching them feed off each other was hilarious. There was also like 7 pies. Like, I'm not joking. There was
Who needs that many pies, yo?
There was a pecan pie. There was an apple pie. There was a blueberry pie, a cherry pie, a chocolate pie, and I think like 2 more. I was like, oh my! I didn't have any of them because I don't like pie. But anyway,
what do we want? Pies. When do we want them? Pies.
Pies.
That's a ton of pies.
It was a lot of pies.
Oh my god.
What about you, AJ?
Well, around like 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, like my family was like, oh, what are you doing? You have any plans or whatever? And I think this year I just wanted to kind of spend it at home. Shannon, who's my girlfriend, she's a nurse and she worked on that Wednesday and Friday of that Thanksgiving week. So we really couldn't go anywhere. And I didn't really want to leave her alone. So I decided to stay at home. And then there was a point where, I talked to Christian and Kaylin, and they were like, well, we're both staying home. We're all staying home. Why don't we just kind of do something all together? And then it kind of transformed into one of our clinicians inviting us over to his house in Miami Beach for Thanksgiving, which, oh my God, shout out to Jim Drayton. That was miraculous. Like, that was a really, really good Thanksgiving, and he was very, very accommodating. Christian could go into it a little bit more detail, but oh my god, that was really good, and I'm very, very appreciative of Jim.
Yes, thank you, Jim. That was a lot of fun. The food was great, and like AJ said, very accommodating. The company was great as well. So yeah, shout out, man. It was good. I already ate all the leftovers. I think all I have left is some stuffing.
Yeah, he cooked a whole vegan side meal. Like, that was awesome.
Cool.
I mean,
that's
whole vegan menu. I mean, yeah. So it was cool. It was cool. All right, well, I'm glad everyone had a good Thanksgiving. All right, so last time we were doing Fundies again. We were talking about the boxes for the MPA adjudication sheet. And in part 3, we had Chris Sampson from Franklin County, Georgia. Is that right, Andrew?
Yes.
He joined us for a little bit of that. And we talked about technique, stability of pulse, dynamics observed, and transitions.
So today we're talking about box 3, which is musical effect. Typically, this is the box where a lot of the magic happens. And the key to box, as we dive into box 3, I'll say it 1,000 times today this episode, but the key to box 3 we always think about is however much shaping or blah, blah, blah that you do in terms of expression or musical effect or whatever, as long as you're doing it with a good sound, any bit will only do you good. You can't really hurt yourself in box 3 if you're doing it with a good sound. But the first thing we have is musical effect, starting with expression. So with expression, the way I try to teach it is it's based off of a study that Marissa showed me about a year ago, and I've been doing it that way anyway, but like this has just kind of reinforced it. And she and I were talking about it this morning. Basically, in terms of teaching expression, there was a study that was done, and I forgot who it was, but I think it was like Richard Greenwood, Schellehammer, and somebody from Wichita State. I don't remember the names, but they were saying that in terms of expression, only about 3% of rehearsal time is actually taught teaching expression, because a lot of time, and in terms of teaching expression, is more specifically teaching conceptual teaching concepts to create musicality easier, is typically only 3% of rehearsal time on average is spent doing that. Whereas, because what happens when people are teaching expression, they're like, okay, hey, push the phrase here because it's a half note, or push the phrase here because it's a blah blah blah, or do this to the phrase, because it's, or do this to the musical line. And I have found that if you teach those concepts in your fundamentals block, like, having them practice their crescendos and decrescendos on a whole, like on a scale, like teach them the idea of, like, as you're going up a scale, you crescendo, as you're going down the scale, you decrescendo, things like that. If you're teaching, and we'll dive more into that as we go through each caption, but starting with expression, teaching all of those ways to make it pretty. If you teach those during the fundamentals time, you can just apply the concept instead of having to, teach it to that one specific whole note. If that made any sense.
Yeah, I mean, all that stuff, expression is such now this is box 3 where we start getting into a little bit more subjective stuff. But for me, expression, I tell my kids, like, how would you feel if every single one of your teachers every single day spoke in a monotone voice? Like, that would be so boring. So I tell them that expression is more or less how we, literally express the music. How are we trying to get that mood, or that inflection of the title of what it wants us to do? Or sometimes they even read the little excerpt at the beginning of, sometimes in a score, like the composer will put like a little paragraph of what they were thinking of when they wrote something, or certain things that they want you to accomplish. I always go and I read that to the kids, because it gives them an idea of what that music is. It's kind of like telling a story. So that expression aspect to it is very important. And I try to tell them, and I honestly agree with that with that 3% of time, because I can tell you right now that is very real. So I think for me personally, I want to try and get that a little bit higher of a number in my rehearsal time.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. And Andrew, to add to what you were saying with using part of your fundamentals time to teach expression, I think we'd all agree that chorales are a great way to do that.
Oh yeah.
And
Yes.
so everybody should be doing chorales, and every time you play the chorale, it should be a little different than the last time. Or one thing that my high school band director did that I like to do when I can remember to do it is have a student come up and conduct the chorale and see if they can open up their expressive mind and let the class decide how we're gonna shape the chorale and things like that. That helps them exercise that side of their brain, that side of their soul. Also, when it comes to expression, another thing I tell the students to think about, and it kind of piggybacks off of what AJ was saying, is, can the audience feel what you feel? So when the piece is over and your parents come pick you up, the first thing they say to you, is it going to be, I could tell that you guys really loved that third piece, or man, I felt so awesome when you guys were playing that second piece. It was just so moving, and I could tell you guys liked it, that's kind of where I take their minds. I'll admit that I'm not the best at explaining expression, but I think that's the beauty of the art of music is, where words fail, music speaks. As cliche as that is, it's more about how are you feeling and what are you experiencing emotionally and sometimes spiritually when you're making music. So yeah. Those are my 2 cents.
Something to add to that, it just popped in my head. It's something that Marissa does with her private students, and I've started doing it. Like when you have your students playing a solo, for example, for S&E or for an audition or whatever. And I watched her do this with her top band last year, for a rehearsal. It was early on in the rehearsal cycle, so it's not too much wasted time. She had, as she played the recording after they had sight read it and they'd already started working on it, she had them, each kid wrote, a quick story that they think of when they're playing the piece. So that way they have some sort of imagery and you can, and through that imagery, you can emote more because there's more things to grab onto, concept wise. And that also makes it a little bit more relatable to the students so they can feel a little bit closer to the piece.
I think that adds to what AJ was saying about if a composer wrote anything about the music, it's definitely good for the players to know.
Right, of course. Then program notes.
Right after expression, we have shaping of line, which is, in my opinion, very much orientated with dynamics and dynamic expression. The shaping of the line. When I was in college at FSU, one of my professors, Professor Ebers, he was my first applied lessons professor before he retired. Taught me extremely important points about what is a musical line and how do you shape that line. And the way that I portray it to students is, think about certain sections of your music as like sentences. So you have the start of the sentence, you have the point that you're trying to make of the sentence, and then you have the end of the sentence. Sometimes they're not in the same place. Sometimes they are in the same place. Sometimes you say the same sentence over and over again with maybe one or two words differently. And for me, the biggest point of that is literally what I just said, the point. So where is the point of, the height of that line, or maybe the lowest point of that line if you're doing a reverse where you're kind of decrescendoing first and then going into a crescendo. But I usually start off by choosing a section in the music where it's very, very obvious that there is a musical line and there's, an obvious point for expression there, where, I'll blow it up on the board and then I will ask the students, where is, maybe the highest note or maybe the lowest note of this section, or maybe the most accented note out of this section. And with 99% accuracy, they'll say, oh, it's this one, or it's a measure, or this beat, whatever. And I tell them, well, that's where you're heading to. That's where you're heading to. And then after that point, you are falling away from that. And that kind of gets their brains moving a little bit with the gears turning. And they're like, oh, okay, that's where I'm heading to. That's why we have a crescendo there. That's why we have to accent that note. There's all different aspects to shaping of line, but that's where I really start off with that topic, just because there's so much. I could go into a TED talk about like phrasing, which is awesome. You have me as phrasing later, but realistically speaking, for shaping of line, I really tell them it's just like speaking a sentence. It's just like talking. You want to get your point across. Ooh, excuse me. It's early. Got my voice cracking a little bit. You want them to get that in their heads early, because they don't really know what that is. Especially seventh and eighth graders primarily. They're getting to a point where they're either getting out of beginning band, or they're 1 year out of beginning band, and they're just used to playing notes, rhythms, maybe some dynamics. But this is like that upper level, if you could say box 3 level of musicianship. Where is that line of music going to and coming from?
Cool. Yeah, good stuff. For me, shaping of line, I kind of learned similar to what you were talking about, AJ, is finding the pinnacle or the top point of the phrase. I took a private lesson from Richard Kelly at that time he was in the Boston Brass, when I was in high school, they came to town, and somehow I was able to finagle a lesson out of him, which was so cool. And one thing he taught me was every note is going somewhere or coming from somewhere, and I've been using that ever since. And the other part of the shape of a line isn't just, I guess, the dynamics, but definitely where are you putting the energy in your sound, and also the start of the phrase and the end of the phrase, so the attacks and the releases, which kind of ties into how box 1 and box 2 really help you amplify box 3. So those are my comments on that. What do you have, Andrew?
I agree with everything you guys said. I think that, in terms of rehearsal techniques, I definitely agree with AJ in terms of, using dynamics as the tool to teach them how to arrive and how to decay. I alluded to it earlier where it's, basic things you can do with the ensemble to get them practicing the actual movement of shaping. You can have them crescendo up a scale, crescendo down a scale. If they're doing long tones, you can have some growth and decay. Different ideas, and it's like the FMEA, build a better band thing that they've been doing for like 5-6 years. Kelly Dorsey, I hear Kelly Dorsey say it every year. If not her, someone else. The idea of, y'all know what I'm talking about?
I'm not familiar.
I'm not either.
It's the Kaminsky Clinic and like the Ivan Wansley Clinic.
Haven't been.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Just
they
do a short blurb.
Yeah, they do it every year.
Interesting.
It's just build a better band and that kind of stuff. But like and they talk about using box 3, and they typically grab like a Tampa band to help use as a band model. But anyway, a big thing they talk about is a big tenet in FBA. It's in basic music in general is if the line goes up, you crescendo in general. And if the line generally goes down, you decrescendo on your way down, unless it's the end of a phrase, in which case, if you're going, as you go down in the line, you crescendo towards the end, because that way the phrase doesn't die off, and the line doesn't die off, and the shape doesn't just decay. But a lot of using dynamics as as the tool to teach that, and then also, yes, the idea of, I agree with pretty much everything you guys said. It's pretty nail on the head, but those are the techniques that I use to teach that stratagem as we plug it into the music and apply it.
All right, next up in box 3 is style. And like I was saying in my last little spiel there, box 1 and box 2 really prepare you for box 3 and help you magnify box 3. And style has a lot to do with box 2, really. And are you interpreting the articulations and executing articulations, I think. But I think even more than that, are you capturing the essence, the time period, the origin of culture and things like that of the music? Are you capturing that with your ensemble? A lot of that is really holistic. Back to what AJ was saying, do the students understand what the composer was trying to convey when you are preparing the piece and performing the piece? As far as technique or teaching style, the best thing that I've seen and learned is just the composer is really good at demonstrating and showing, not the composer, the conductor. The conductor is really good at demonstrating and showing with their gestures the style that should be played. So that's all I have for that. What do you have, Andrew?
Something that can be said for every caption. First off, I agree. You really do need to know the piece and need to know the context of the piece in order to make sure that the style is effective and accurate. But something that can be said for every caption in box 3 is the idea of exaggerating. And typically, in order to make the style, and we've said this in past Fundies episodes before about making it as obvious as possible, you want to exaggerate your articulations, whether it's a note length, longer light, or exaggerating, the weight of how you're articulating, or exaggerating, the impact of, like, let's say if you're playing something Granger-esque, and he's got, like, Granger's famous for all those interruptions, y'all know what I'm talking about, like, like in Shepherd's Hay. you want to exaggerate those moments that are specific to specific composers, in order to make it more accurate. And again, AJ also hitting the nail on the head with the reading the program notes. Sometimes that's the whole thing. There was a piece we played a couple years ago called it's a grade 2 in Florida Hebrew folk song suite by Leroy Osman, and it's a great piece. It's 3 movements. The third movement, the program notes, is so weird. The program notes is literally a guy goes to the store, goes to the market, tries to buy a fish. The fish is out of stock. He has to figure out, and then the rest of the story is him trying to figure out the lies he can tell his wife of why he failed to bring a fish home for his kids. And that's the program notes for the third movement. I was trying to figure that out with my band, and like they couldn't really grasp the style of Hebrew music. But I told them the story of the program notes, and they're like, "Oh, okay," and it immediately clicked because you can hear the comedy and you can hear the tragedy of his like, "Oh no, I gotta go home and I ain't got no fish." Like it's a very comical piece, but it doesn't sound like that outright. And once we understood what we were trying to convey, it came through, and the style was much more accurate, and they had a successful performance. But like, yeah, for sure, like it's program notes and exaggerations. But you, AJ?
There's not much to add. I just feel, with style, it's an extremely important aspect to everything. It kind of is the bow on top of everything, right? Like, so we've done everything in box 1 and 2. We've talked about shaping of line, and now we come into style. So style really captures everything else in box 3. When we come up on interpretation, phrasing, tempo, dynamic expression, those are the rest. That's the rest of it. But style is everything. Style is how fast or slow do I play a certain section? How fast or slow do I play a certain, little portion of, not a little portion, but a little section of the entire piece? How loud or soft do I play? How accented or how legato do I play? Everything. It's just, and style is everything. So I make it a point to tell the kids that if you're not playing with style, the emotion, the extra stuff, the chills, the goosebumps, that's never going to happen with the audience, because you're not painting a picture for them. You're not giving them something to imagine in their heads while they listen to that music. And I always kind of, I've done this before where I will I'll play like something from John Williams, like I don't know, like Hedwig's theme from Harry Potter. And the kids will like all start freaking out as soon as they hear like the first 3 or 4 notes. And I'm like, well, why are you able to picture this? Yes, there's a movie that goes along with it, but you're able to picture it even in your head without watching the movie. It's because there's so much expression going into the actual playing of the music. If these musicians that John Williams was conducting, if they played it very bland without anything that we've talked about in box 1 or 2, and with some of the stuff in box 3, you would feel like the movie wouldn't hit as hard. So I always make it a point to tell them that style is absolutely everything, and you have to hold them accountable. You have to tell them, were you playing with style just then, or were you just playing notes and rhythms? And more often than not, once you tell them what style is and you show them what style is, whether that be what I just said, like by playing a piece of music or anything like that for them, they'll be honest and they'll be accountable. You just have to show them and be a little bit more on them that, hey, this is what style is. This is how you do this. So that's my bit.
The next part is interpretation. I find that this, of all the captions, is probably the most subjective, because there are people who couldn't define it, and for a long time I really couldn't define it. When I think of interpretation, I think of style is related to it, because you're trying to create an accurate depiction of what the composer intended. But I also think of interpretation. I think interpretation changes, and how you interpret certain things and certain pieces changes as you get older and have more experience. Like when I think of interpretation, I think of the concept of decision making. are the decisions you're making with your ensemble and the choices you as an ensemble make in regards to phrasing or in regards to style, in regards to articulation. Are they appropriate? It's making appropriate decisions. Like, if you've got a piece, you got a march, and the march ends, a phrase ends on one, and then you have a pickup on into the next measure. Sometimes people would think it's appropriate to. Some people would interpret that release as holding it all the way through and having no pause between the phrase and the pickup. Some people would interpret it as you do release on one, have a quarter rest, and so it's, and those decisions need to be corroborated with other directors and other music teachers that are either have similar experience as you or have more experience, just so you can kind of get ears and you can come to a consensus. Like it's important to get the right interpretation. You need to have ears on your band that are not yours, so that they can hear not only things that you're not hearing, but also hear things in a different way. They hear what you hear, but they're like, yeah, I don't like that, try this. And then you try and you go, oh, you know what, maybe that was a good idea. Or vice versa, you try and you're like, I don't know, and then maybe they can agree with you. But it's interpretation is making appropriate decisions for your ensemble per piece that makes sense and can convey what the composer was intending. What about you, AJ?
Yeah, all that's great. I think it's good to define what that is, because it is a very, very subjective topic. It's literally interpretation. We all have different interpretations of everything. Whether or not we want to subscribe to certain ideas or certain beliefs, everything is going to be different in some way, shape, or form. So, just to add on that, I think what's also extremely important is probably listening to some more recordings if you can. I know that, us being middle school directors, it's kind of difficult to listen to, certain pieces if we want to play it and get like different feels for it. But, the idea is still there. You can try and go on YouTube. We have the miracle of YouTube, that we can search up anything and just listen to it. I also think listening to certain ensembles play certain ways, maybe, like you said, reaching out to other directors who have had experience with the piece, maybe, just trying to get input from people who have played that piece before, so you can come up with your own interpretation or a widely accepted interpretation. I always am wary of the fact that an interpretation could be interpreted as incorrect. So yes, you have to be careful with that. You can't do anything too crazy, but as long as it's in the spirit of, in the true spirit of the piece, of the style of the piece, of the era of the piece, I feel like you can do a pretty good job just by using your musical knowledge, reaching out to other directors, recording your band playing it, and sending it to other directors. Maybe that would be a great idea, just so that you can get some other ideas from your directors. You can get some other input from them, because interpretation, like I said, it's different from person to person.
Yeah, definitely having other people listen to your ensemble is very important. I think hearing other recordings is very important when it comes to interpretation. I will say this, though. Someone tries to tell me that my interpretation's wrong, I'm just going to tell them it's an alternative facts.
Nice.
That didn't land the way I wanted to. All right.
No, you tried. It's okay. It's okay.
Kayla, cut that out. I'm embarrassed.
No, leave it in. Leave it in. That stays in. Anyway.
Interpretation is very subjective. So, but hopefully, especially with the training that FBA does for our adjudicators, whoever is adjudicating you will understand that, there's more than one way of interpreting a piece. So,
just to jump
really,
in real quick,
have an educated idea of how the piece should sound and go from there.
Yeah, just to jump in real quick, I feel like there's a level of trust that the adjudicators have when they're listening to you after a certain point. I know that they're always listening, they're always trying to find something, but in my head, I feel like if you've done your job and, you've gone through, you've hit you've hit everything in box 1 and 2, I feel like there's a level of trust that they'll have with you playing a piece with a certain style or interpretation, whether you take a risk or not.
Yeah. It's always about what's appropriate. Like you just, because, you don't want to play a piece, you don't want to play Adagio for strings at 120, and just understanding what makes sense for this, for what you're doing. And that comes from an education on the music, which we've all hit on, but the word is appropriate for me.
Mm-hmm. All right, AJ, phrasing.
All right.
So, TED Talk time.
TED Talk time.
Phrasing. Oh, man.
I'm going to go get a coffee real quick. I'll be back in about 20 minutes. I'm just kidding.
I won't take long, honestly. I'm just going to hit on a few points. I know that we could spend all day at, if we go to Casa or something like that, we could talk about this. But for the sake of the podcast, I hold phrasing very near and dear to my heart just because this is the point of music that I always felt whenever I played. And that's the key word, is I felt phrasing. So you have to be able to feel phrasing. Does it make sense, first and foremost? Does it sound like it makes sense to do certain things within a phrase? And I always tell the kids, a musical phrase is like a sentence in a paragraph. It's not the whole paragraph, it's not the whole book, but it's a sentence that could have some important details or some important facts to it. And when you can accurately portray a phrase, whether that be through dynamic expression, whether that be through articulation, whether that be anything, slurring, anything, the audience is going to get what you're playing on more than a superficial level. They're going to get, I always tell kids sometimes, raise your hand if you've ever gotten chills or you've ever gotten goosebumps when you've listened to a piece of music before. And some of them will raise their hand. And I'm like, well, all the stuff that we talk about in box 3 really can't be done without phrasing. You have to separate, the apples from the oranges when it comes to certain lines. So you can't play everything the same. Some things are going to be a little bit more important than the other. And again, it's just one of those topics that is more felt than accurately and definitively described. So when I tell the kids about phrasing, I kind of tell them there's this tension and release that needs to happen so that there's some kind of satisfying moment that when you're listening to or when you're playing, this is why we do what we do, so that we can have this kind of push and pull with the audience or with just ourselves when we're playing, that gives us, it kind of breathes life into what we're doing. Why do we just play music? Well, we don't just, we're not a robot. I always tell the kids, we're not robots. They can just, just.
I'm not a robot. I take.
No. Oh God.
So I tell them that
throwback.
Yeah. Jesus.
I tell them that, go to Boston Dynamics. In Boston they have those walking dog robots. Have you guys seen those?
Yeah.
Those are crazy. But besides the fact, they could probably strap an instrument to one of those robots and have a certain mechanism to blow air or whatever, and they could play something perfectly. But where's the emotion in that? There's a human connection that needs to be made through phrasing and through ideas, interpretation. All these things that we've talked about so far goes into phrasing. And for me, I'm sure you guys can tell, and whoever's listening, you guys can tell, that's just one of the hallmarks of whenever I put my instrument on my face. How can I portray my emotion, excuse me, how can I portray my emotion of the music that I'm playing, or how I feel when I play, to the audience or to whoever's listening or to the judges. And to be honest, there's a lot of times where I've listened to judge tapes, whether that be a soloist, or even sometimes a marching band, or on stage at MPA, where judges will comment on artistry, or getting a point across very beautifully, or these are where you start hearing the words that are adjectives that are give you the plus sign in that section. So with phrasing, I just tell them, please don't just think that it's some kind of what's it called, like abstract topic. It's not. It's very definitive, but there's so much abstract that goes into it that makes it definitive. I don't know if that makes sense. Probably doesn't, but that's my 2 cents on that.
Amen, brother. For phrasing, I put phrasing and shaping of line in the same category.
Phrasing can be taught from, in beginning band, because
Yes.
the moment you play your first song, the question is, did you play it completely? Are you speaking in complete sentences, and does it sound whole? Where you're stopping and where you're starting, does it make sense? Where the tension and the releases, does it make sense? Is it appropriate? Something really easy that you can do with your band is, especially if you're playing something slow, whether it's for a concert or assessment or whatever, is, I'll I'm trying to think of the piece. We played it. It was like my second band played a couple years ago. Was it Dancing? Not Dancing Antigua. I don't know. I don't remember what it was, but it was basically the idea. It was a slow piece, and I was like, all right, if I hear a breath where I shouldn't hear a breath, which is bar lines, end of obvious points, then we will start over and we will continue, forcing them to stagger breathe and make sure that the phrasing is complete. We're not all breathing in the same spot. And understanding how one phrases start and end, but phrases also tie into each other, and working on those transitions between phrases, making sure that they connect, make sense, and are appropriate. So, that's something you can do with slow pieces. And then it's just also the idea of, oftentimes you can just have the discussion with your band in terms of the technical aspect of phrasing. Have a discussion with your band of where the phrases should be. Sometimes, you can have a phrase within a phrase. And sometimes whether it's an antecedent phrase or it's consequent. Sometimes you can, maybe the phrase was 8 measures, but the band likes it as 4, or blah, blah, or you like it as 4. And just having those discussions and making sure that we understand phrasing is subjective and can change, while also having a very concrete element to it that can be listened to, discussed, and assessed in different ways.
Now we're moving on to tempo, and I guess this is tempo choice. How are you expressive with tempo? How does tempo influence musical expression? I guess it could be, are you taking liberties with the tempo, and do they make interpretive sense? I don't know, but that would be my guess. What do you think, Andrew?
Well, Christian, you're kind of reeling from that false joke, man. You okay?
No, I'm fine. It's just, what's happening is as I'm going through these, it's starting to get redundant.
Yes.
So, hopefully I'm not coming across as negative. I don't care that I don't care that it's redundant. It's fine, but that's just kind of where I'm at with that.
No, I get it.
Because we talked about tempo the last 2 episodes.
Right.
Yeah. But I think I had the word I used for box 2 is obvious, and the word I used for box 3 is appropriate, and I think it goes into tempo as well. Are the tempos you're choosing appropriate? Don't play 120 on Adagio for strings.
Don't play Adagio for strings.
But you don't know. I love that piece. But also the idea of, were your transitions in tempos effective? Did they make sense? Were they smooth transitions in tempo?
Yeah, but even then, it's still box 2. You know what I mean? Like,
I get what you're saying. But if your transitions are smooth musically, you can in terms of, and you have control over your tempo, like saying if you take liberties, if you have like a little bit of a rubato.
Yeah, that would be more box 3.
Yeah, rubato is more musical concept, but with rubato, you're technically slowing down the time or having lilt with the time. So do you have control over your sense of time as an ensemble as you take liberties through those transitions? Is kind of where I'm going with it, and that lends itself to box 3.
I'm sorry. You can keep going.
No, you're good. No, that's all I said.
Honestly, I was thinking about this while you were talking. Whenever I watch drum videos or drummer videos or like drum kit videos, I always hear one word that's always in the discussion, especially with drummers. It's groove. Does the ensemble groove together? Does it like feel like they are all like committed to that tempo? And I feel like that's more or less what box 3 tempo is trying to get at, where it's more of a feeling rather than, are they accomplishing said tempo printed on black ink on the page? So with that groove, is it like, oh, are we like having a good time on stage and we get the tempo and it's like, yeah, we're getting this portion, or are we just kind of, we put our metronome on and we're just playing it there? You know what I mean? Like there's a pocket feel to what that is. So with that being said, I mean, I know that tempo is, we've talked about it for the past, I don't know, however many episodes, but we talk about it every episode because it's so important. But is it more of like a feeling in box 3, or is it an accomplishment that we need, or an achievement that we need to get to, like a plus or minus, like from box 2? I just feel like box 2 and box 3, they're so wildly different because one is more about achievement and the other is more about, okay, are we getting somewhere that is beyond like the fundamentals? Are we achieving that aspect of feeling, of emotion? And it's kind of difficult to say that something so definitive like tempo can be emotional. But I think that if we think about it in terms of like a groove and a pocket that we have to stay in, and we just can, I tell the kids, can you dance to this a little bit? Can you like nod your head to this? Can you get into it? That's more or less of what I interpret as tempo for box 3.
Thank you guys for filling in my gaps on that, because seriously, I did not have anything close to the thoughts that you guys just shared on that.
I think if you want a good example of expressive tempo, listen to Colonial Song by Granger, and that'll solve that. Because man, that band, like any good, like you listen to the Texas Wind Symphony, it's such lilt. It's like that's expressive tempo. If I could think of a piece off the top of my head.
For me, I was thinking about West Side Story the whole time.
Ooh,
like just mambo. I was like,
yeah.
I can like nod my head. I can nod my head to that. It's like that pocket, that groove. So
yeah, I heard Austrians sing that song one time, and they pronounce it mambo, not mambo. Mambo. I was like, what?
Interesting.
No offense to Austria, but
I love it. So dynamic expression is the last one. I think of, because again, you can talk about dynamics in box 2, but the difference between box 2 dynamics and box 3 dynamic expression is box 2 is, are you doing it? And box 3 is how you're doing it. Because it's not what volumes you're making, it's how you make them. Especially with the word being relative to each other. Last year at MPA, there was a judge who he was the comments that I listened to the most because he gave us our most critical rating. It was the idea of in his opinion, everything we were playing was just a notch too loud. Even though there was definitely dynamics observed, everything was just a little too big. And And as I listened to my band more and more that year, I completely agree. They just their volume is loud, and it's the idea of, as you're playing in box 3, in order to make your dynamics observed effect and dynamic expression effective, you need to have a wider range of dynamics. So that way, as you are shaping the line and you are, shaping the phrase, and you're going from the tension point to the release point, and you're increasing in volume, you're going up and higher in range and lower in range. All of those things in terms of dynamics have to be obvious and as expressive as possible. Your pianos, is it really a piano compared to where you're going or where you came from? And same with fortes. And so it's the idea of, as you're thinking of dynamic expression, you need to be comparing where you start versus where you come from at all points. Every dynamic, like if you're looking at a piano, you need to be looking at the dynamics that you were at before that piano and the dynamics you were going to after that piano in order to determine the appropriate level of that piano, if that makes sense. And making sure that there's a constant fluctuation, but they're all relative to each other, and at no point you're either too soft or too overbearing.
I have the same issue. I feel like my band is way too loud. I think we get into this place where we feel like we're only ever going to play in a band room, if that makes sense. Like the kids are like, they get this litmus test of how loud can I play and it still sounds good. And then when we get into a really live setting, whereas the band room is very dry, they realize, I'm a little bit too loud. I'm a little bit too overbearing. It's tough because you gotta train them for, how many times can you say that you rehearse on a stage, where we're always in a band room. We're always rehearsing in a band room. All our stuff is in a band room. So for us to, and I'm a big proponent of practice how you're going to perform, right? So we can't really go on stage and practice how we're going to perform. I mean, we have pre-MPA. That's pretty much it. And we do a little bit of a rehearsal on stage then. But again, that's only one night out of many days of rehearsal that you got to train them. So dynamic expression, that's a big one because that can make or break, everything that we've talked about so far in number 3, in box 3.
And for me, for dynamic expression, it will take away from the expression if you also don't keep box 1 intact with the intonation and tone quality while you're doing the dynamics. And that's the real challenge there. But we had already talked about how to practice that and how you should practice that in fundamentals time. So just make sure you're aware of that. You should be good with dynamic expression.
Any other final thoughts on box 3?
Box 3 is always my most challenging box. So that's just an ongoing project for me as a band teacher.
I agree. No, box 2 and box 1 I've always got in the bag, but box 3 always has me scratching my head. I gotta bring in other people to tell me what to do. Typically I always bring in Marissa because like she loves box 3. She'll say her biggest weakness is box 2. And it is an MPA fact. I love MPA. I'm training to be an adjudicator, but there are some times where judges will forgive box 2 if your box 3 and box 1 is stellar. Because you don't technically need box 2 in order to perform box 3 if box 1 is there, because it's like you said, Christian, as long as what you're doing sounds good in box 3, because you have box 1, you'll be able to pull out some dubs. And
box 2 though has a lot to do with what the judges are seeing too.
I agree. No, I completely agree. And you have to be excelling at all of them in order to get the desired performance in any context. But Marissa's always got like a ton of thoughts on box 3. She could talk about it forever. I was trying to see if I could bring her in for this episode, but she went to Target, and that's okay. But yeah, AJ, any final thoughts?
I am always more I'm always more in touch with my emotional side when it comes to music. I feel like for me, box 3 is very it's easy for me to portray for the kids. So I feel like my box 2 is where I really need to focus on. Now that we're wrapping up, going through all of these, I don't know how long we've been doing this for 2-3 months now, just going through the adjudication sheet. I really feel like, it kind of progresses through the sheet. So box 1 is obviously fundamentals, box 2 is after your fundamentals, and box 3 is the cherry on top. Although you can teach all of them at a very early stage, it builds off of each other. And you can't have, and this is where I kind of disagree with Andrew, which, it's fine. We all have different views, but I don't know. I just feel like they all play off of each other. And, maybe you'll have the occasional judge that says, oh, that was really effective musically. But, there can be some technical aspects that don't allow you to be effective musically. If you're not right with your entrances, or if you're not right with rhythmic accuracy, you can't really have musical effect. So I just feel, with that being said, it kind of graduates each time once you hit each section or each topic within each box. That you have to, be cognizant of the fact that with box 1 comes box 2. And then with box 2 comes with box 3. And because you are at box 3, you should still be holding your ensemble accountable with box 2 and box 1, always. So that's where I'm at. That's what, and for me personally, I'm just starting my career. So I feel like there's a lot of work to be done on my end, but that's where I'm at with this. And, I'm actually really appreciative of this opportunity for us to, discuss this, just because, I never got this opportunity to do this in college or anything like that. I can do this at home or by myself, but, we all talk about it. It definitely makes more sense to me.
Sure. Final thought, and then we're going to wrap it up, is all of these can be taught at the same time. Don't fall into the pitfall of, I'm going to get all the notes right first, and then I'm going to apply all the music. No. They should be playing musically with wrong notes, and then fix the wrong notes as you're going through. Because by the time you get to that, you've got 2 weeks left. So teach it all now. Anyway, this has been the Florida Band Podcast. We're going to try and get all these Fundies episodes on YouTube in a playlist. It'll be our first playlist, guys. We completed a series.
Yeah, actually we did. That's cool.
Hell yeah. So we're going to get this all on in YouTube. We're going to see if we can get this as a playlist so that you guys, and whoever's listening can review this maybe once a year as they're prepping for MPA, or just in general, because they love hearing the silky smooth voice of AJ Garcia. We'll get this moving. But this has been the Florida Band Podcast. My name is AJ Lopez. We've got Christian Gordon and AJ Garcia. We will catch y'all next time.
See you guys.
Bye.
See ya.